Support the channel by subscribing. It helps us create new stories about the real America for you.
Dawn breaks on May 6, 1864. The wilderness sprawls before Grant's army, a tangled hell of scrub oak and thorns. Yesterday's battle left thousands wounded, crying through darkness. Today decides whether Union momentum survives its first test against Lee. Grant studies maps in his tent, cigar smoke curling upward. He knows Lee lurks somewhere in those trees, but where? The Confederate general always strikes when least expected. This forest could swallow entire brigades. One wrong move means disaster. You're standing where Orange Plank Road cuts through wilderness like a scar. This dirt path becomes today's killing ground. Hancock's 2nd Corps controls the southern approach, believing Confederates retreated overnight. They're wrong. Lee's entire right wing masses invisibly, waiting. Robert E. Lee watches dawn from horseback, eyes burning with desperate calculation. His army cannot trade blows forever against Grant's superior numbers. He must shatter Union confidence now, where numbers mean nothing. One devastating counterstroke could send Grant retreating. A.P. Hill's corps holds Lee's right flank, but Hill himself lies fevered in an ambulance wagon. His men spent yesterday fighting without rest, or food exhausted, disorganized, vulnerable. Lee dispatches urgent messages to Longstreet. Arrive quickly, or everything collapses. I'm Winfield Scott Hancock, preparing my morning assault with practiced confidence. My 2nd Corps represents Union power, at its finest disciplined veterans who've never broken under fire. At 5:30, I order them forward down Orange Plank Road, expecting scattered resistance. The Union line advances through smoke still hanging from yesterday's fires. Trees burned through the night, consuming wounded men who couldn't crawl away from flames. Their screams haunted both armies until dawn. Now, survivors push through smoldering deadfall, unable to see. Private Thomas Williams walks beside his Massachusetts regiment, throat dry with fear. Yesterday, he watched his captain beheaded by canister shot. Today, the forest feels alive with menace. Every shadow could hide rebel sharpshooters. He grips his rifle tighter. Hancock's divisions slam into Hill's exhausted Confederates at 6 o'clock. The collision happens at point-blank range. No time for formations or tactics. Men fire into smoke, killing enemies they never see. Hill's line buckles immediately. Rebel soldiers flee westward. Lee watches his right flank disintegrate with mounting horror. If Hancock breaks through here, his entire army gets cut in half. Where is Longstreet? His reinforcements should have arrived hours ago. Lee rides forward personally, desperately trying to rally fleeing soldiers. Confederate officers attempt forming new defensive lines, but their men keep running backward through burning underbrush. The forest works against defenders, now no clear fields of fire, no anchor points. Hancock's troops surge forward like a flood, capturing abandoned artillery. Then, drums echo through southern trees. Longstreet's corps emerges from morning mist like ghosts made solid 12,000 fresh soldiers in perfect formation, marching double quick toward collapsing lines. They've force-marched all night from Gordonsville. Exhaustion shows everywhere. Discipline holds. James Longstreet rides at his corps' head, eyes cold and assessing. He's Lee's most reliable subordinate, methodical, where others are impulsive, unshakable under pressure. He surveys the chaos instantly. Hill's men fleeing, Yankees advancing confidently. His orders snap out. Texas Brigade forms Longstreet's spearhead, 800 men, famous for ferocity in combat. Their commander places them directly across Orange Plank Road. They fix bayonets without being told. These veterans understand their assignment: stop Hancock's entire corps or die trying. Lee rides to the Texans personally, emotion overwhelming his usual reserve. These men have saved his army before. He raises his hat in salute, voice breaking. Texans always move them. The brigade roars approval. Lee turns his horse toward the enemy. Texan soldiers grab Lee's bridle, refusing to let their general advance into the firestorm ahead. "Go back, General Lee," they shout desperately. "We won't go forward unless you go back." For precious seconds, Lee resists. Then he yields, understanding their determination. The Texas Brigade charges into Hancock's advancing divisions at full sprint. Their rebel yell cuts through gunfire, a sound that makes Union veterans flinch instinctively. They crash into Federal lines with bayonets and clubbed rifles. The collision happens too fast for reloading. I fire 3 shots before a Texan tackles me. Private Williams fighting desperately in burning leaves. We wrestle without gaining advantage. I smell his tobacco and sweat, feel his breath on my face. A rifle butt strikes my temple. Everything goes dark. Hancock's advance stops completely. His veteran divisions, unstoppable moments before, now reel backward under Confederate fury. Longstreet feeds fresh brigades into combat systematically, each attacking slightly south of the last. He's not just stopping momentum, he's rolling up their flank. Forest fires intensify as thousands of muzzle flashes ignite dry underbrush everywhere. Flames spread rapidly through thickets too dense for men to escape quickly. Wounded soldiers from both armies scream as fire consumes them alive.
If you're interested in the true history of America, subscribe, and let's figure it out together.
Officers try organizing rescues. Smoke blinds everyone. You see Grant receiving reports of Hancock's repulse with characteristic stoicism. He lights another cigar, refusing to show emotion that might demoralize staff officers watching nearby. Previous Union commanders retreated after less severe setbacks against Lee. Grant calculates different options. Retreat never enters consideration. Longstreet sees opportunity in Union confusion spreading across the southern flank. If he flanks Hancock's exposed end, the entire Second Corps could collapse entirely. He summons 4 brigades for a risky maneuver. Through unmapped forests, they'll march parallel to Union lines, invisible. The flanking column moves through wilderness so thick that maintaining direction becomes impossible without compasses. Officers navigate by instinct. They march in silence, hearing Federal voices just yards away through trees. One cough could betray them. Men step carefully over crackling leaves. At 11 o'clock, Longstreet's flanking brigades erupt from forest directly into Hancock's southern end. Union soldiers face completely the wrong direction when the sudden attack begins. Entire regiments surrender before understanding what's happening. Confederate momentum builds rapidly. Hancock's supposedly unbreakable corps starts fragmenting. Union officers try organizing defensive lines, but forest prevents coordinated responses to the surprise assault. Orders get lost in smoke and confusion. Regiments fire into each other accidentally. Panic spreads like the fires burning around them. Thousands of Federal soldiers retreat eastward. Longstreet rides forward to direct his counterattack's climax personally. Victory lies within reach. Grant's offensive shattered. Confederate morale restored completely. He gallops down Orange Plank Road with staff officers, planning the final devastating push. Then muskets crack from nearby trees. Confederate soldiers, firing blind. Bullets strike Longstreet in throat and shoulder simultaneously. He tumbles from his horse, blood streaming. His staff panics. Is he dead? The general tries speaking but only gurgles blood. Officers carry him rearward desperately. News spreads through Confederate ranks instantly. Longstreet down. Momentum dies. Lee assumes direct command of Longstreet's corps, but precious hours vanish in reorganization and confusion. Confederate soldiers, exhausted from morning fighting, need rest and ammunition desperately. Union defenders, terrified moments before, gain time to establish new positions. The moment for decisive breakthrough passes. By evening, fires still burn through wilderness. Deadfall relentlessly. Smoke hangs so thick that soldiers 50 feet apart remain invisible to each other. Both armies dig shallow rifle pits, knowing tomorrow brings renewed combat. The day's fighting cost 12,000 casualties. Neither gained ground. I sit among captured Union soldiers behind Confederate lines. Private Williams, with a throbbing head from earlier blow. Around me, wounded men cry for water nobody has. I wonder if my family will learn what happened, or if I'll simply disappear into war's anonymous carnage. You watch Hancock walking his shattered corps' positions after dark, face gray with exhaustion and shock. His Second Corps suffered 25% casualties today. Regiments that began the morning with full strength now muster only skeleton formations. Yet, they hold their ground. Grant stands outside his headquarters tent, cigar glowing red in darkness around him. Staff officers watch nervously, wondering if he'll repeat his predecessor's pattern retreat after bloodying against Lee. Grant surprises them. He issues orders for continuing southward tomorrow. No retreat, ever. Lee sits beside Longstreet's ambulance, watching surgeons work by lantern light flickering. His best corps commander will survive, but needs months recovering from the severe wounds. Today's counterstroke succeeded tactically. Grant's offensive stopped cold. But Lee knows strategic truth. He merely delayed inevitable destruction. Confederate soldiers dig graves by torchlight, burying comrades killed during the day's desperate fighting. They're too exhausted for proper ceremonies or prayers. Bodies get rolled into shallow pits, covered with dirt and leaves hastily. Tomorrow brings more killing. These survivors know they're living on borrowed time. In Washington, Lincoln awaits telegrams from Virginia with mounting anxiety and sleeplessness. Previous spring offensives always ended in Union retreat, and thousands of wasted lives pointlessly. Will Grant prove different? The president needs victory desperately. His re-election depends on military success. He paces alone. Confederate pickets hear strange sounds from Union lines after midnight wagons moving, troops marching southward. Are the Yankees retreating finally? Excited reports flow to Lee's headquarters. But scouts return with confusing news. Grant moves south, not north. He's not retreating, he's advancing again. Grant's decision to continue attacking despite wilderness setbacks fundamentally changes the war's character forever. Previous Union commanders withdrew after bloody stalemates, giving Lee time to recover strength. Grant refuses that pattern completely. He'll keep attacking, keep moving, keep applying pressure until Confederate resources crack. By dawn on May 7th, both armies resume maneuvering cautiously through smoke-filled woods. The wilderness still burns fires, will smolder for days afterward. Burial parties work through mourning, collecting bodies from yesterday's killing ground. They find men from both armies burned beyond recognition, lying intertwined together. The wilderness battle cost 30,000 casualties in 2 days of fighting without decisive result. Neither side achieved clear victory. But Grant's decision to advance, rather than retreat, marks warfare's new reality. Lee can win tactical battles endlessly. Grant possesses resources to absorb losses. Longstreet's counterstroke on May 6th demonstrated Confederate tactical brilliance perfectly. A smaller force smashing superior numbers through perfect timing and terrain exploitation. But it also revealed Confederate vulnerability. Lee depends on irreplaceable subordinates. Longstreet's wounding eliminated Lee's most reliable corps commander at a critical moment. Orange Plank Road remained soaked with blood for weeks afterward. Locals avoiding the area. The forest slowly reclaims its battlefield, vines covering rifle pits and trenches methodically. Nature erases human violence with patient indifference, preparing ground for future generations' discoveries of rusted muskets and buttons. Hancock never fully recovers from his wilderness experience psychologically. The sight of his supposedly invincible Second Corps fleeing in panic haunts him permanently. He becomes more cautious in subsequent battles, second-guessing decisions that previously came instinctively. Psychological wounds last longer than physical injuries. You walk among Texas Brigade, survivors wearing their wilderness scars proudly decades later. They stopped Hancock's entire corps with 800 men. But pride mixes with grief. Half their number died in that desperate charge. Veterans remember comrades left burning in wilderness fires, wondering about easier deaths. Confederate confidence, briefly restored by Longstreet's counterstroke, slowly erodes over subsequent weeks of continuous combat. Grant keeps advancing despite every tactical setback. He fights at Spotsylvania, then Cold Harbor, absorbing horrific casualties but never retreating northward. Lee's soldiers realize they face an enemy impossible to discourage. Union troops develop grudging respect for their Confederate opponents during wilderness fighting. Rebels demonstrated remarkable combat effectiveness, despite shortages of everything necessary. Federal soldiers begin understanding that defeating such determined enemies requires not just superior numbers, but absolute commitment to grinding warfare, regardless of cost. Lee's health deteriorates noticeably after the Wilderness Campaign begins its relentless pressure. The strain of constant combat against Grant's attacks ages him visibly. Staff officers notice his heart troubles worsening, his stamina declining, but he refuses to relinquish command. Who else could hold this army together? Grant's willingness to accept massive casualties while continuing to attack shocks both armies equally. Critics call him a butcher, indifferent to soldiers' lives. But Grant understands strategic mathematics. Union can replace losses, Confederacy cannot. Every battle Even tactical defeats weakens Lee proportionally more. Arithmetic determines everything. The forest fires that terrified both armies during combat become the wilderness battle's most horrifying memory for survivors. Veterans recall comrades' screams as flames consumed them, unable to help despite desperate attempts. Some wounded men shot themselves rather than burn alive. Those memories produce nightmares haunting survivors for decades. Northern newspapers report Wilderness as another bloody Union defeat, requiring Grant's removal. Civilians demand his dismissal, comparing casualty lists to previous disasters. But Lincoln refuses to replace his general. For the first time, the president has a commander who understands that winning requires enduring setbacks without losing nerve. Southern newspapers celebrate Lee's tactical victory while carefully avoiding strategic implications entirely. Yes, Lee stopped Grant's offensive, but Grant didn't retreat, he advanced. That unprecedented Union persistence worries perceptive Confederate observers. How do you defeat an enemy that treats tactical defeats as mere inconveniences on its path? Soldiers on both sides develop new respect for wilderness terrain's power to neutralize advantage completely. Dense forest eliminated artillery superiority, reduced visibility to yards, made coordinated maneuvers impossible. Both armies learned that some ground favors defenders, absolutely. Future commanders study wilderness tactics for lessons. Longstreet's recovery takes months of painful rehabilitation. He returns to command eventually, but his wound affects his voice permanently. The general who led the war's most devastating counterstrokes now speaks in hoarse whispers. His men claim to hear strength in those whispers, surpassing other officers' shouts. Confederate supply problems, already critical before Wilderness, become desperate afterward. Lee's army consumed enormous ammunition quantities during 2 days of intensive combat. Resupply proves difficult. Union cavalry raids disrupt railroad lines regularly. Soldiers begin rationing cartridges carefully, knowing they might not receive more for weeks. Grant writes his memoirs decades later, reflecting on wilderness lessons learned. He acknowledges Lee's tactical brilliance, but emphasizes his own strategic insight. Battles don't determine wars, campaigns do. Winning individual engagements matters less than maintaining offensive pressure continuously. That philosophy defined his subsequent career. Modern historians debate whether Lee should have avoided battle entirely, preserving his army rather than accepting costly combat. But Lee understood his political constraints clearly. Confederate government demanded visible resistance to invasion. Retreating without fighting would have demoralized Southern civilians and encouraged Northern peace advocates dangerously. The Wilderness demonstrated how technology changed warfare while tactics lagged behind dangerously. Rifled muskets created deadly firepower at ranges where commanders couldn't effectively control troops. Dense terrain fragmented battles into countless isolated skirmishes. The old Napoleonic model of massed formations and decisive cavalry charges died here. Orange Plank Road today appears peaceful and quiet, trees shading the historic path. Birds sing in branches overhead. Nothing visible suggests that thousands died here once. Only small historical markers indicate battlefield locations. Wilderness has reclaimed its ground, erasing human violence with growth and time's passage. I survived Confederate captivity, though barely Private Williams exchanged months later, weighing 40 pounds less than at capture. My family barely recognized me. I never spoke about wilderness experiences, even when my children asked decades later. Some memories prove too terrible for sharing with loved ones. Hancock lives until 1886, dying as a respected senior general. His obituaries emphasize career highlights but mention wilderness only briefly. He requested that no monuments mark his wilderness positions. The memory of that day's confusion and defeat embarrassed him, even in old age. Lee dies in 1870, 5 years after war's end. His final words reportedly reference war memories that still haunt him. Staff members claim he called Longstreet's name repeatedly during his last night. The counterstroke that saved his army on May 6th remained vivid until consciousness faded. You see Longstreet outliving most Confederate generals, dying in 1904 at age 83. He becomes controversial after war, criticizing Lee publicly and supporting Republican policies. But wilderness veterans remember him, commanding their desperate counterstroke, turning certain defeat into temporary victory. That memory transcends politics. The Texas Brigade disbanded after Appomattox, survivors returning to devastated home state. They held annual reunions until the last veteran died in 1932. At each gathering, they toasted fallen comrades from Wilderness fighting. Those 800 men stopped an entire Union Corps. Their sacrifice earned permanent respect. Grant eventually accepts Lee's surrender at Appomattox exactly 11 months after Wilderness fighting began. The two generals meet courteously, discussing old Army days before war divided them. Neither mentions Wilderness specifically. But that battle initiated the campaign that ended at Appomattox. Everything afterward flowed from Grant's decision. Modern military analysts study Wilderness battle for lessons about leadership under crisis. Longstreet's counterstroke demonstrates how decisive leadership at critical moments can reverse apparently hopeless situations. Grant's refusal to retreat despite setbacks shows how strategic vision transcends tactical defeats. Both generals offered models remaining relevant. The wilderness burns no more. Trees grow thick where soldiers once fought desperately. Silence replaces gunfire and screaming. But those who study history carefully can still hear echoes: the Texas Brigade's rebel yell, Longstreet's crisp orders, Grant's quiet determination. Those echoes remind us courage takes many forms.
If you're curious to find out what happened next, subscribe. The sequel is coming soon.